Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership for TEPSA. And each episode, I look to bring you another guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another, and bring them on to share some of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell some of yours. I am so excited and thrilled for this episode to have my friend Chase Mayo on. Chase, tell everybody a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. It's awesome to come on your program that you do every single day. It's really awesome. My name's Chase Mayo. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm the director of events for the Hope and Way King Company.
So if anybody has ever been to a Get Your Teach On, you will recognize Chase Mayo, but he is always behind the scenes. So I was so thrilled when you agreed to come in front of the camera today to kind of share some things. But Chase, you have been in event kind of stuff, whether it was Blue Man Group or different organizations, or you've kind of had that kind of vibe for a while now. When you were growing up, did you know that you wanted to be in kind of a management planning kind of organization?
Not really. My earliest memories, I've always had a camera in my hand. One of the first gifts I remember getting as a kid was a Tyco Kids video camera that was in black and white, and that you connected like a little cable into the TV. You couldn't even record anything on it. And so I knew going into college, I wanted to go into some form of production. So I applied to the University of Central Florida, where I met Chris Pombagno and Adam Trottenberg that do a lot of work with us, and got involved in their video productions department for the Office of Student Involvement, which does a lot of the events at UCF. I applied to the broadcast production program and didn't get in, which was a bummer. And then I slowly kind of found my way and navigated through UCF to get into events. So I tried going into theater production because early on at UCF, and I was still a sophomore, is when I got hired at Blue Man Group as a theater usher. And so I was like, I'll do theater production. That's cool. It's behind the scenes. There's a lot of overlap into broadcast production. But then I found out that they discontinued that program, and you could only take the tech classes if you were in a full kind of BFA program, which involved a lot of acting. And I wasn't about to be on stage. Then I found the events program with the hospitality school, because being in Orlando, there's a huge hospitality program.
Oh, yeah.
So I ultimately got a degree in hospitality management, but kind of made my way from video production at events with UCF into kind of overall production with events. And then that kind of just led me to where I am today.
So, you talk about video production, but for those of us that haven't been in that kind of environment, what exactly all does that entail? What, just with the video production side, is that just you behind a camera filming it and chopping the video later, or does it have more elements to it?
So there's a few different kind of elements to it. When I talk about broadcast production and video production, for me, that's anything live. So something like this.
Okay.
Generally, like if you're going to school for it, or you're trying to get into like the film aspect and like make movies and edit videos and do things like Justin Bettengort puts out, or the Brodsky brothers that do a lot of stuff with Get Your Teach On too. That's like a film kind of program that we'll get in a film, because it seems similar and the same on the outside, but behind the scenes it's night and day and couldn't be different.
I'm sure for those educators who are listening, I'm sure it's like working in different grade levels or in different like content areas. It's like it all looks the same on the surface, but it is very different behind the scenes.
That's definitely like a great analogy. If you I've never in a million years thought I would know anything about education. But yeah, it's a great analogy. Like, it's from the outside, like a teacher is a teacher, but a kindergarten teacher is very different than a high school teacher.
Yeah.
And not that either's better, they're just very different, but the outside looking in, they look really similar. And then that's kind of the same with video production.
Well, you mentioned that you were a theater usher for Blue Man Group. Now, that obviously led to you working much more than just ushering people to their seats. Mm-hmm. And so how did that progression happen?
So to start, like I went to college in my freshman year. I was looking for a job, And I had gotten a job working at the arena on campus at ECF and hated it. Like, I'll be completely honest, I hated the job. And so I heard about this show coming to Universal called Blue Man Group. Really didn't know anything about it other than I went to the theme park and saw the coming soon signs. And I applied and got offered an interview to be a theater usher. And I did not want to go to the interview. I have a very distinct memory. I was walking to like the cafeteria on campus, and my mom called me and she wanted me to like wish me luck on the interview, because it's about when I was supposed to be driving over to Universal. And I told her, I was like, Mom, I'm not going. I don't want to drive, 40 minutes to work every day. Like, I'm here to enjoy college. And she's like, you need to call them right now. Tell them you got, food poisoning, and reschedule the interview. And I rescheduled the interview and it changed my life.
Wow.
But I was a theater usher, and they were expanding their video team, because if you haven't seen a Blue Man Group show, like, there's a ton of video components. So they've got a pretty decent sized video production team that works on the shows. And at that point, I had just started volunteering for the video productions department at ECF. And it's like, you know what, I'm just gonna take a shot and apply for this job, that was significantly like more pay, like completely different. Never in a million years do you hire like a college sophomore at this point.
Yeah.
But they took a chance and hired me. And from there, I started kind of bouncing around. They were really looking for people that could cross-train into other roles. So I trained into 3 different positions backstage during the show. And then my degree program like teaching programs require you to do like actual experience in a paid internship. Right. And so I went to the GM of Blue Man Group and said, hey, listen, like, I need more hours for this to count as my internship. I'll work, I'm already getting paid some, so it counts, but need any office work done, let me know. I'll do whatever it takes. It's just like trying to be a go-getter. And unfortunately and fortunately, it was around the Great Recession in 2009, and they laid off a lot of their staff. And so to have a, bright-eyed, kid coming in that's still in college, wanting to work for free, they took me up on it. And that's just kind of, how I moved up. And by the time I left, I was a manager of marketing communications, working on TV appearances.
I love, though, that it's like that classic story of just coming in and interviewing for this really low-level job and then moving your way up. I mean, you don't see a lot of that in education necessarily, but I always love when you see like, oh, that's so cool. Like, you actually stayed with one group for a while and moved your way up through there. Working with an organization like that so big, what was probably your favorite memory from working there?
Oh, there's a ton. Like working on La Voz, which is the Spanish version of The Voice. Blue Man did a big appearance on that. Like, that was definitely a ton of fun.
Cool.
But I mean, just overall, all of our offices had TVs mounted on the wall that was a live feed from the show. And so one of the things that a lot of us like to do was stay late on certain nights, especially if you just had work to do, and then go down into the actual theater. And it's very similar to events, like just watching the people watch the show is probably the best part of just going down there into the audience and seeing, kids or families that have, this is their one vacation that they've been, planning for years to go on. And then just watching them light up when the show starts and when the Blue Men come out into the audience and all that. Like, that's definitely the most rewarding part, and one of the best kind of like recurring memories.
Right.
We also did an engagement that was a surprise from a guy that was coming back from, I think, Afghanistan. Surprised his girlfriend who was at the show with her family. And did a big kind of engagement. So that was definitely fun. I still follow the now husband and wife on like Instagram and stuff, and like, they sent me like some gifts periodically. Like, that was really great.
Those kind of homecoming things always get people. So I'm sure it was emotional to be there in person to see one of those. But, Chase, you go from working with Blue Man Group to having this opportunity to do this up-and-coming conference, Get Your Teach On, being involved with that. When you first heard about Get Your Teach On, I'm sure Chris connected you because you're friends with him, but were you kind of like, what is this thing? Like, why would I want to be involved in education stuff? Like, I'm an entertainment person.
You kind of hit the nail on the head. So I had just left Blue Man Group, and I was starting to do some freelance work. And I was like walking home from like picking up a pizza, and I get a call from Chris, and I hadn't heard from Chris in probably a year, asking if I know how to do live streams. And to be honest, I didn't. But I said, yeah, sure, like I'll figure it out, like what's going on. And he's like, well, yeah, he's like, we really want to do this like red carpet thing, like we used to do back at UCF, because Chris was he was the head of the Mr. and Miss UCF pageants at UCF, which is how we worked together. And he's like, yeah, I remember how we did this red carpet. It's like this event. It's in the middle of nowhere in Indiana. And it was Holly Ely Spring Teacher Retreat. And I was like, yeah, sure, like I'll figure it out. And fast forward a few months, I'm with Chris and Kristen Sloan from ESGI, and we're in at French Lick Resort doing the Spring Teacher Retreat. And I met Hope and Wade there, and I could not wrap my head around the idea of us doing a red carpet and that these are teachers, but that we're like interviewing teachers. Like it made no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then like I looked back on a lot of the footage from that actually a few weeks ago, and it's seeing all these people that like I know now. Like Amy Lemons was on it, like Gary Brooks, and they then invited me to go to San Antonio for one of the stops on the Texas tour, which was kind of really early in Get Your Teach On. And then that led to Hope and Wade having me do some stuff for RCA, and then just. I did more and more Get Your Teach Ons, and eventually I was in charge of kind of all production. And then that led to being kind of in charge of just total event operations.
Well, and and you run all the Get Your Lead Ons as well, that Adam DeVico and I do. And I'm telling you, for those of you who are listening, Get Your Lead On would not happen at all without Chase Mayo, because I think people don't understand, like, when you show up at a conference or any kind of event, you show up and you enjoy the experience and you meet people and you just take it all in. But you have no idea the months of prep work that has gone in to organizing and getting all that together. And so from a behind the scenes standpoint, as you've been working more and more in this position, what's one of the things that has really, maybe surprised you the most that people don't realize goes into this? Or what surprises people when you talk to them, even that?
Well, I mean, first of all, like if I'm doing my job right, you shouldn't know that I exist. Like right. that's the ultimate goal, is that you should not know that I exist. But I think the biggest thing that surprises a lot of people, or that people don't necessarily think about, is how much planning really goes into it. In events our size, like especially something like the national conference. I mean, we have venues booked out, for years. And the planning starts, sometimes before the conference ends, like we're already working on the next one. So it's not uncommon if you see me on my laptop at a conference, I'm most likely doing emails and work for a conference like 2 down the road. So it's just, there's so much planning that goes into it, and it's such a team effort, and there's so many people behind the scenes that work ungodly hours to make it happen. And that's what I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize. But again, like if we're all doing our job right, you should realize it, and you should know that what's happening.
Well, so after something like the national conference, do you go and like sleep for like 3 days?
Yes, I like to pretend that I don't. After this last national conference, one of my really good friends actually lives in Grapevine. And we had like all these plans to go like kayaking and hiking and all that stuff the day after the conference, and I couldn't get out of bed. Adam Trottenberg, who everyone calls Treehouse, was my college roommate, and he does a lot of work at the conferences now too. And at a given conference, we generally walk about 13 miles a day. That's kind of the last, when we were in LA, that was when we really tracked it. And we were each getting about 13 miles a day.
Well, half of that's not even walking, like you're running from one place, especially in those huge spaces. You've got to get somewhere fast. So every time I turn around, where's Chase? I see you running.
Like
exactly. And that's what as I've gotten to know you more and different things, it's like I don't think anybody truly understands the work that goes behind the scenes until you spend some time, and then you realize these things could not happen without every single person doing their role and bringing that all together. And so I think it's incredible to watch. And the other thing you get to do is, when you are working on finding places to have events, I mean, you as the planner, you've got to go and preview them and things like that. But I've got to ask this question. So I still remember following you on Instagram and seeing you go to like some Taco Bell hotel or something. And I was so jealous because I know Wade King is like the world's biggest Taco Bell obsessive person. I'm not quite that far. I do love Taco Bell. But when I saw, I was like, oh my gosh, he's like getting a Taco Bell margarita or a Taco Bell this or that, or all these desserts from Taco Bell.
Mhm.
And so I've got to know, what was that resort like? Like, was it truly everything of a Taco Bell person's dream?
Oh, that was a definitely spur of the moment decision with my buddy Cody, who owns a t-shirt company in Florida. And it was incredible. It was definitely something you could do in a day, and we were there for like 3 or 4 days. So you get a little tired of Taco Bell.
Yeah.
But no, it was incredible. They took a hotel in Palm Springs, California, I'd never been to Palm Springs, and completely overhauled it into the Taco Bell hotel. And they did it in the matter of like 3 days, which I thought was incredible. But it was a ton of fun. Like there were bands that played each night. All like at the pool, they'd ring like a big like gong, like a Taco Bell bell. And they'd like have people walking out with trays of food. They'd bring out Taco Bell menu items that you can't get in the States, but are at like Taco Bells around the world.
Yeah, that's what I was most jealous about, because I would see you post things and I'm like, I've never seen that before. I want to try that.
The fajita quesarito was the best thing that I have ever had from Taco Bell. And it's, I think, from the UK is where they sell it. But yeah, they had Baja Blast in every conceivable form. Baja Blast slushies with nerds in them, Baja Blast like in almost like a margarita form, like anything you can imagine Baja Blast, they had it Baja Blast.
Well, I couldn't do a tell your story without asking, of course, about the Taco Bell thing.
Yeah, no, it was great. Would I do it again? I don't know, but it was a ton of fun.
That's all that matters. But speaking about you getting to go to that stuff, is there a favorite place that you visited that you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely the top of my list of places to go?
In terms of like a conference location, or just in general?
Just in general, like where, if you were to go get on a plane today and there was no quarantine, where would you go to visit?
I'd probably go back to Iceland. I went to Iceland last year, immediately after DHH Orlando. So I left loadout, got on a red eye, and flew to Iceland. And that was incredible. It was the most beautiful place I've ever been. Second to that would probably be Nicaragua. Nicaragua is beautiful. The beaches are beautiful. So I know they're like polar opposites. One's like cold and dark, and the other is like sunny on the beach. But yeah, those are the two places that I highly recommend anyone going if they have the opportunity.
I love that. I've heard very positive things about Iceland, so it doesn't surprise me that that's on your list too. Well, Chase, when you reflect on your life and all the things you've been through, the ups, the downs, the celebrations, the heartbreaks, when you reflect on that and look at those experiences, what is one that really sticks out to you that you say, that was really definitive in creating the man we see today?
Oh, that's a tough one.
I'm sure there's probably several examples that you can think of, but what's one that comes to mind that you're like, yeah, that really helped shape who I am today?
Honestly, it probably goes back to what I said earlier about, not wanting to go to that interview. Because I was young and was like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
And getting that call from my mom was like, just do it. And that's kind of the mentality that I've had kind of the rest of my life is just try something, just try it, just do it. You never know what's going to come out of it, because for that, by actually going to that interview, it changed the rest of my life. Like, I don't know if I would have stayed in production. I was thinking about the other day, like, had I not ultimately gotten that job and gone to the interview and then gotten the job, when I found out I didn't get into the broadcast production program at UCF, I don't know where I would have gone. I wouldn't have had the insight of realizing, wow, like theater is a thing. Oh, corporate events are a form of theater. Like, and just being able to make that connection all the way through to where I am now. And so I think that was probably one of the most defining moments of my life, was saying, all right, fine, I'm just going to do it. Because I always look back on that when I'm trying to make a decision if I'm going to do something or not. Was like, you know what, like, I went ahead and just did that. I didn't want to do it, but I did it, and look where it led me. And so I think that's kind of probably one of the most kind of pinnacle moments of my life, just because it led me down the path where I am now, and knowing and that by making a decision like that, how big of an impact it can be.
Yeah.
So that it really just has led me to always think, try something. And it's what we were talking about before this really started. Like when you texted me about doing this, it was very much, I'm always behind the camera.
Yeah.
But then it was like, you know what, like, I'm just going to do it.
Well, Chase, and that's what I want to ask next is that, you are a behind the camera person. You get to focus on that work and not have to worry about being the huge, personable, out there, the big, everybody looking at you thing. But your role requires you to interact with a lot of different people. And so how do you balance those two sides of wanting to stay back from the spotlight and focus on that work, but also having to be such a personable person when you go and interact with people?
Well, I don't know if people would say I'm a personable person, Todd.
I would say you are. I mean, I know you don't always see yourself, but I would say you are. I often have really hard times with small talk and little things like that, but you are really good about always making, at least Adam and I, always feel comfortable and calm and things like that. So I think you carry a very unique skill set of, you don't change yourself depending on who you're in front of, but you do really well at communicating and making people feel comfortable. And I know you may not see that, but how do you balance the two? Because I'm sure it's probably more difficult for you to be out there in the groups and talking to people than it is for you to be back behind the camera.
Oh, it's 100% more difficult. It is a tough question. And I wouldn't necessarily say I struggle with it. I think part of it is that I guess I am a personal person. And one of the things that I saw the other day was something about like introverts with extrovert tendencies. And I'd say it's kind of where I fall.
Yeah.
That I do like being behind the camera, being behind the scenes, and working on things myself. But there is a side of me that does crave that human interaction and being out there and talking with people and everything else. And so I'd say that it a lot of it comes down to just like being able to focus on work,
Right.
but then being able to also just I enjoy that interaction. And I also view it almost, I don't necessarily view being in front of a camera like this the same as having that kind of talking to a group one-on-one interaction.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, it's very different. Hope was actually talking about the other day when we were taping her lesson, her ELA live lesson, which she's got another one this afternoon, about how for teachers it's very different to present a lesson to people and to kids than present a lesson to a camera. And I feel very similar. It's it's very different for me to talk with a group of my peers and all of that than being in front of a camera.
Yeah. Well, all I heard from that answer was that you wanted to be a guest speaker at the next Get Your Lead On. So Adam and I will make that happen, and I'm sure it'll be a fantastic session. So, well, Chase, one of the last questions I always love to ask in these interviews is, as people, there's certain beliefs that we hold tightly to, or that we are hugely important to us. And so for anybody listening today, if there were one thing that you wish more people knew or understood, what would your one thing be that you hold really close?
Hmm. probably that people generally are trying their best. That you run into challenges, or you or get emails from people or phone calls, and you look at it and say, like, I don't understand why they can't do it. Like, what, and you get mad and frustrated, and I get mad and frustrated. But generally, I think deep down, people are always trying their best. And I think that as long as you as an individual or me as an individual are trying our best, like, things will work out. And I think that's the number one thing for me is always try your best, and believe that generally speaking, people are probably also trying their best.
I love that. And that's the perfect way to end this episode. Well, Chase, you are somebody I just greatly admire and respect. And when I convinced you to come on, I was so excited to be able to interview you and kind of introduce more people to just a great human being. So thank you so much for coming on today, Chase.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a huge surprise. I got the text, and it definitely means a lot to be on here, because you have so many amazing people that you interview day in and day out, and just be considered as one of those people is a huge honor. So thank you.
Well, I think you're fantastic. So, and thank you everybody for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your stuff, it's there. I hope today's conversation with Chase has encouraged you to get out there and share your story, because every story matters.